I want you to imagine something you won't like. A scenario where for a moment you disappear. You disappear from the lives of all those who swore they needed you, who looked for you when their world was falling apart, who called you at 2 a.m. because they couldn't handle their own feeling storms. And then what you never thought would happen occurs. No one stops, no one breaks, no one fades away because you are no longer there. Do you feel the drop in the pit of your stomach? That sharp pang that tells you maybe your endless giving only served to sustain a theater where you were the only one who never charged admission? Look at that scene. The house is still standing. The office is still working. Friendships keep breathing. The only one collapsing is you. Do you feel it? That tightness in your chest is not sadness, it's terror. The terror of suspecting that maybe all this time you gave yourself up to be needed, to earn a place in a heart that never had a reserved spot for you. That won't make sense yet, but it will soon. You became the family's shock absorber without knowing it. Every crisis found you like metal to a magnet. Every feeling emergency became your job to resolve. Every conflict needed your help to restore peace. You didn't choose this role. It chose you through repetition and need. Think about it. How many times have you silenced your own tiredness to support someone else's sadness? How many times did you pretend everything was fine while your inner world burned like a fire with no witnesses? How many nights did you stay awake handling other people's problems while your own dreams died from neglect? You learned to mistake your capacity for absorbing pain with your capacity for love. You confused your tolerance for others' chaos with strength. Your willingness to give up your own needs became virtue in your mind. The role grew so central to who you are that you cannot imagine existing without it. But here's the uncomfortable truth. You were never loving them. You were feeding them. Like a dying animal that doesn't know how to run, you became feeling food for those who never learned to sustain themselves. And while you bled in every embrace, they convinced themselves you were endless. When you finally stop being everyone's feeling regulator, you don't just withdraw a service. You reveal how fragile the entire system really was. Talks become awkward because you're no longer absorbing the tension. Family gatherings fall apart because you refuse to smooth over conflicts that adults should handle themselves. They experience your withdrawal as abandonment rather than growth. They feel betrayed when you stop absorbing their feeling overflow, not because they're evil, but because they never realized they were creating overflow in the first place. Their feeling regulation was handed off to you so completely that they lost awareness of their own inner weather patterns. You become dangerous because you reveal how little feeling strength they actually have. Your absence from their feeling ecosystem exposes how fragile relationships built on your hidden giving really are. What looked like natural human connection was actually a complex system of feeling outsourcing that required your constant self-abandonment. The collapse happens slowly, then all at once. They first assume you're going through a phase. You'll return to your previous availability once you've had time to rest. When it becomes clear that the change is permanent, when you consistently refuse to resume your former role, the real crisis begins. Their social system must either evolve to handle real feeling maturity from all participants, or find ways to eliminate the person whose independence threatens its basic assumptions. You didn't choose to become the designated helper, the family fixer, the friend everyone calls during their darkest hour. You discovered this role through repetition and the crushing weight of guilt that came with watching others struggle. Jung called this living according to scripts inherited from the collective unconscious, patterns of behavior that maintain social unity at the cost of individual authenticity. Your script was thorough. Absorb pain that others cannot process. Transform conflict into harmony. Carry feeling excess that would destabilize the system. You answered the first call during crisis, so you became the person everyone calls. You absorbed family anxiety because someone had to prevent the system from breaking apart. You solved problems that adults should handle themselves because watching others struggle triggered guilt so deep that helping felt like your only option. This role became so automatic that questioning it felt like questioning gravity itself. You learned that your value as a human being was directly tied to your usefulness to others. You discovered that love meant giving yourself until you disappeared. You were taught that boundaries were selfish, that saying no was cruel, that your own needs were secondary to everyone else's comfort. But here's what almost no one understands. This script was never about love. It was about control. It was about creating a system where one person gives up everything so others never have to face their own feeling children's behavior. Awakening means script abandonment without replacement. You stop performing your assigned function in the family system, the friend group, the workplace hierarchy. You refuse to carry feelings that don't belong to you. You decline to manage conflicts between other adults. You withdraw from your role as the group's designated feeling processor. This creates what Jung called a disruption in the collective persona, the social mask that groups wear to maintain unity and avoid confronting their own dysfunction. When you stop playing your assigned role, everyone else must either develop their own feeling capacity or find a replacement for the services they've lost. The search for your replacement becomes desperate. They scan their social networks for another person willing to absorb their overflow, manage their conflicts, and maintain their comfort. When they cannot find this replacement, they experience you as dangerous, not because of what you do, but because your refusal forces them to face their own feeling dependencies that they've spent years avoiding. The danger emerges from your willingness to exist outside inherited social scripts. Your presence becomes a reminder that these scripts are choices, not inevitable truths, and that other ways of being human are possible. You've completed something that most people never attempt, learning to distinguish between your own feelings and feelings that belong to other people. This separation happened through necessity, not choice. Through years of painful internal work that left you exhausted, but finally, authentically yours. Your refusal to absorb others' feeling states gets interpreted as lack of caring, when it actually represents the development of mature feeling boundaries that you fought to develop. You've been conditioned to believe that love means taking on others' pain, that strength means absorbing what would overwhelm someone weaker, that care requires the giving up of your own well-being. When you refuse to participate in this dynamic anymore, they experience your boundaries as rejection rather than recognizing them as the natural result of development. They interpret your self-respect as selfishness. They mistake your feeling autonomy for feeling abandonment. You now operate from a stable center rather than reactive accommodation to others' feeling demands. Your presence suggests that feeling autonomy is possible, which challenges their reasons for remaining feeling dependent on you for regulation, validation, and basic stability. The violence isn't physical. It emerges from the fact that your authenticity exposes their performance. Your refusal to participate in feeling theater forces them to confront how much of their relationship pattern depends on manipulation, control, and feeling exploitation disguised as need. Your mere existence reveals the gap between how they present themselves and how they actually function in relationships. If they built their self-concept around being strong, they must face their own weakness when you stop absorbing their feeling overflow. If they maintained their sense of importance by creating crises, they must confront their own irrelevance when you stop responding to manufactured emergencies. This authentic presence becomes completely unmanipulatable. You cannot be guilted, shamed, leveraged, or coerced into resuming your previous role. Your independence makes you immune to the feeling strategies they use to maintain control. Guilt, obligation, manufactured crisis, feeling blackmail, or appeals to your previous identity as someone who always helps. People experience this immunity as rejection, abandonment, or betrayal, when it's actually the natural result of maturity. Your authentic presence reveals how much of human interaction depends on mutual feeling manipulation rather than genuine care, forcing them to choose between developing their own authenticity or retreating into increasingly desperate attempts to restore the previous dynamic. Jung identified the shadow as repressed material that people refuse to acknowledge. In dysfunctional systems, certain people become designated shadow carriers, absorbing and processing the feeling material that others cannot face. You traditionally carried the shadow for your entire social system. You absorbed their unprocessed grief, unexpressed rage, disowned weakness, and rejected sensitivity. This allowed everyone else to maintain their comfort while avoiding the difficult work of integrating their own feeling complexity. Think about how this played out in your life. When someone in your family was angry, you absorbed that anger and transformed it into something more palatable for the group. When friends experienced grief, you cried their tears for them. When colleagues felt overwhelmed, you took on their stress until it became indistinguishable from your own. When you awakened to your own completeness, you stopped carrying shadow material that belongs to others. This wasn't a conscious decision so much as an automatic result of integration. Once you reclaimed your own shadow material, you lost the capacity to carry shadow projections from others. This created a crisis of projection throughout your social system. All the feeling content that was safely contained in you suddenly got distributed back to its original owners. Family members must face their own grief instead of watching you cry for them. Colleagues must manage their own anxiety instead of dumping it on you. Friends must process their own relationship conflicts instead of using you as a feeling translator. The redistribution creates chaos because the original owners lack the tools to process their own repressed feeling content. They experience the return of their own shadow as an attack from you, when it's actually an invitation to maturity that they're free to accept or reject. You become dangerous because you refuse to serve as a dumping ground for material that was never yours to process. Your presence forces them to reclaim their own disowned feeling material, which they experience as overwhelmingly uncomfortable. Rather than face this discomfort and begin their own development, they often project responsibility back onto you for refusing to carry what was never yours to begin with. This shadow redistribution reveals how much of their social functioning depends on someone else processing the feeling material that they find too threatening to their self-concept to handle independently. Your withdrawal forces them to either develop their own capacity for shadow integration or remain trapped in patterns that require external processing to maintain stability. You deflated your persona as the designated helper, fixer, and feeling processor. You no longer perform these roles to maintain your identity, social position, or sense of worth. This creates authentic presence that they find deeply uncomfortable because it reveals how much of their social interaction depends on performance rather than genuine connection. Your authentic presence works as involuntary truth-telling. Your refusal to participate in feeling theater forces them to confront how much of their relationship pattern depends on manipulation, control, and exploitation disguised as need or care. Your mere existence reveals the gap between how they present themselves and how they actually function. They experience this immunity as rejection, abandonment, or betrayal, when it's actually the natural result of maturity. Your authentic presence reveals how much of human interaction depends on mutual feeling manipulation rather than genuine care. You discovered that what they called intimacy was actually mutual exploitation, where both parties avoided authentic selfhood by merging into undifferentiated feeling chaos. Your refusal to participate in this fusion exposes how little genuine connection existed beneath the feeling enmeshment. The awakened empath who has crossed the threshold of their patience doesn't become a monster. You become someone who can no longer be used. And that transformation terrifies those who always fed off your unconditional giving. Society adores empaths when they are docile, predictable, when they are available at any time. But the very moment you decide to prioritize yourself, the entire system reacts with rejection because a conscious empath is a danger to all who benefit from their docility. You start attracting different relationships, connections that don't feed on your giving up, but on your authenticity. People who don't demand you bleed to deserve a space in their lives. And that quality of connection is so powerful, so unknown, that at first it scares you because you don't know how to relate without feeling you have to pay with your feeling wear and tear. Here is a deep lesson you will have to assimilate. The guilt that invades you when you prioritize your well-being is not yours. You were taught it. It is a cultural residue that glorifies giving up and demonizes self-worth. You are programmed to believe that love means giving yourself until you disappear. But that is not love. It is submission. What they are sensing in you is not your healing. It's your willingness to exist without the scaffold that supports their identity. You have crossed a threshold that cannot be uncrossed. You've developed feeling autonomy that makes you immune to the strategies they use to maintain relationship control and dependency. Your presence reveals how much of human connection depends on unconscious agreements to remain feeling childish, to avoid authentic feeling, genuine weakness, and independent thought. You've stopped participating in the collective decision to outsource feeling regulation to others, while avoiding the difficult work of development that authentic relationship requires. Your independence forces them to confront how much of their own identity depends on feeling fusion with others, how much of their self-concept requires other people to remain smaller, weaker, or less developed to maintain the illusion of their own strength or importance. When you stop spending your mind solving problems that aren't yours, you start to recover the ability to create, to imagine a different future, to explore paths you had buried under guilt. Think about how many projects you never started because you were always exhausted. The music you never learned to play, the books you never wrote, the trips you postponed. The most paradoxical thing is that the further you go on this path, the more you realize you don't need everyone to understand you, that your worth does not depend on anyone's gratitude, that your dignity is non-negotiable. And then something miraculous happens. You learn to love yourself with the same devotion you once reserved for others. The danger isn't what you might do to them. The danger is what your example reveals about what they've been doing to themselves, how much of their own feeling experience they've abandoned in service of maintaining relationships that require their diminishment to survive. You've discovered that authentic love doesn't require the giving up of autonomy, that genuine connection doesn't demand feeling fusion, that real intimacy becomes possible only when both people maintain their own center rather than merging into undifferentiated feeling chaos. You are no longer usable. You are no longer controllable. You are no longer willing to betray yourself for their comfort, and that makes you the most dangerous person they'll ever meet.